Good morning and welcome back to the SCRD Finance Committee Round 1 budget for January 25th, 2023. We are continuing on in our agenda from yesterday and Monday. We are currently on Annex EEE, which is regional solid waste. But just before we get into that particular item, I'm going to give the infrastructure team an opportunity to do an overall introduction if they wish.
Yeah, there we go. That's too slow.
Yeah, speaking for solid waste, as you guys know, we manage the landfill, Pender Harbor Transfer Station. One of our big ticket items is development of the solid waste management plan, as well as under another cost function, curbside collection on the coast.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. All right, directors, then we are on page 539, regional solid waste. We're looking at project number 1, which is Seashelt Landfill interim power supply. Director Gabias.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question in regards to the cost, obviously. The $48,000 is for 2 generators this year, correct?
Thank you for the question. So it's for the rental of 1 generator and the fuel costs of both.
Okay.
This past year, 2022, we purchased a generator from utilities, and so that cost that you're seeing there for $48,000 is a 50-50 split between fuel for both and rental for the 1 generator.
Okay. So that follow up.
Go ahead.
So that explains the cost for next year, which
That's
is about
correct.
the same. Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
Yes, I would like to move that this budget proposal be approved and incorporated in round 2.
Thank you. And I've got a seconder for that. Director Bax, I see your hand up.
Yeah, you said it's a partial for rental. We bought one and we're renting a second one?
Yeah.
Is there no reason to buy a second one, or is it more cost effective? Are we not going to be using this second one later? Is that the story?
Yeah, that's precisely correct. You'll see the next project here with the power supply for the landfill connecting to the hydro grid. The intent is to maintain the one that we bought and give that rental back because we'll only need 1 backup generator at that point.
All right. I don't see any other hands up, so I will call the question. This is voting all directors. All those in favor? And opposed? Director Henderson opposed. That's carried. Thank you. Moving on to item number 2, which is on page 540, which is the Seashelt Landfill power system replacement. I know that this is an ongoing project that we're basically waiting for hydro on. Director McMahon.
Yes, that's really what I was going to say. It seems like we've been waiting on hydro for a very long time, and every time this comes back, the estimate is higher. How long has this been going on, and what can we do to encourage them?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So yeah, as you've seen, costs are increasing across the board with a lot of items here. This final piece of money here for the short-term loan required for this will allow us to go to hydro, pay up front, and get in line, and then it's kind of up to them to schedule us in. So once this budget's approved, we'll hopefully have some more accurate timelines, but we're estimating connection to the grid likely in 2024.
Wow. Director Gabias.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering, since the landfill is set to shut down in 3-4 years, is that correct?
Thank you for the question. 2025, 2026,
Okay.
But there are other options to extend that life further, one of which you'll see later in the projects here.
Okay, so it is still a good investment to set up hydro, even though the landfill will, be closed in the future. in your opinion?
That's correct, because the infrastructure we have there at the residential drop-off area with the scale and all those bins, that could be utilized no matter what we choose to do for future waste disposal. So that site is still a worthwhile investment for Sea Shelter.
That was part of the conversation, as to putting that much money into that public drop-off area, is that when we go forward, whether it's another landfill or transfer station for off-coast, we can still use the public drop-off area, so it'll still be of a benefit. So Director Bax,
Yeah, so the public drop-off area will be kind of a transfer station?
effectively.
Oh, I've lost my train of thought.
I can always come back to you.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
I'll get
Director
back on.
Henderson?
Thank you, Chair. There's a lot of that going on. I'm trying to, you've answered the question that hydro, you don't think hydro will have us connected until next year. So is that, why is this in our budget this year, even though I'm in favor?
Yeah, thank you for the question. The reason is we have to pay up front to Hydro.
Of course. I should note that my power was cut off all day today, but they don't give me a refund, so. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Bax?
Yeah, sorry about that. So when you say you're gonna pay up front, is Hydro gonna lock in the price at that point and not, when it comes time for the, installation, are they going to come back and say, well, you paid this much, but you have to pay so much more? Is it possible to get them in a contractual agreement to supply the services at the price that we pay?
That's correct.
Thank you. Director McMahon?
Right, I would like to move the following budget proposal be approved and incorporated in round 2.
And I have a seconder for that. Thank you. Several seconders for that. I don't see any other hands up, so I'll call the question. This is voting all. All those in favor? Thank you. That's carried. And moving on to number 3 on page 541, Seashelt landfill aggregates. It's $32,000 to be funded from taxation. I'm sorry, CAO McKinley, I didn't see your hand.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, and that's because I just raised my hand. I feel remiss in not, I should have taken a moment to introduce the team we had in the room before you today, because a couple of these fine folks you haven't had a lot of chance to meet or spend a lot of time with before. So I'm going to try to back the bus up and correct that mistake, if I may. At the front table today, we've got Mark Soul. He's our manager of solid waste services, and Mark's been with us how long now, Mark?
2.5 months.
2.5 months, a seasoned veteran of the Solid Waste Services Division, able to answer all of your questions, no matter how far back in time you choose to go. Joined at the front table with Mark is Brian Shoji, who's one of our capital projects managers. Brian has rejoined us after a hiatus of a few years, I believe. At the back, we have Shane Walkie, manager utility services, and Steve Mazuriak, capital projects manager, and Mia Edbrook here, who's actually acting for Remco while he's away. He'll be away another month or so. So that's the team. Please continue.
Thank you, CAO McKinley. All right, so item number 3 on page 541, $32,000 from taxation for Seashell landfill aggregates. Directors, any recommendations or questions or discussion? Director Henderson.
Thank you, Chair. My question is, why is this, after 2.5 months, why is this not a recurring item in our operating budget? Because every year it's up there, it's a problem.
Yeah, thank you for the question. And the reason the addition is coming to you today for $32,000 is that we've had to do some additional drainage work on the site to manage runoff around the scale house. And we also have a perimeter road that we have a regulatory requirement to maintain, which goes around the outside of the landfill footprint. And it's in quite bad shape. And so we feel that in order to meet that requirement, as well as the additional aggregate to fill potholes from the drainage work that we've just done, we need this additional money for that.
Follow up, please. So this is a one-time, what you're saying is you're doing extra work.
That's correct, but you are correct that there is an ongoing cost for aggregates on the site, but this request above what the base budget is particular to the additional work that we've had to do for the drainage.
Thanks.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
And you just said those magic words, perimeter road we must maintain, so I assume that that will go forward. We'll still have to maintain that even when the landfill is closed, is that correct?
That's correct. It's not a high-maintenance road because it doesn't see a lot of traffic, but there will be some brushing involved. Essentially, that road's there for fire control and access to the site.
Wonder if we can get a MODI classification on that road. Director McMahon, go ahead.
Yes, and I can tell you what it is. It'll be 8F. So, thanks. I would like to move that this be approved and incorporated into round 2.
Thank you. And I have a seconder for that. Director Gabias?
Thank you, Chair. Given that this is a discretionary item, I'm wondering if Manager Sol could explain what the consequences would be if we did not go ahead with this?
Yeah, thank you for the question. The biggest consequence is probably that drainage work that I mentioned that had been done will result in more potholes as the gravel and aggregate settles, and so we'll likely have more potholes on site that we don't have the money to fill until such time that we get funding for the aggregate. So it may just be a little harder for people to drive around the site.
All right. Director McMahon, I see your hand up.
Just a curiosity question. Seeing that we are half a stone's throw from a giant aggregate pit, I'm guessing that's where we get the aggregate from.
I think it's outside the purview of our conversations. So I don't see any other hands up. So I will call the question. Voting all. All those in favor? 4 in favor. Opposed? Tie vote. That's defeated. Directors, do you have another recommendation that you would like to make? Director Bax, I see you nodding.
Well, then I'll pick number 3 on the menu and refer it to, is it number 3? Yes.
Number 3 is to refer it to round 2.
Refer it to round 2.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. And I have a seconder for that. Thank you. I don't see any hands up, so I will call the question. All those in favor? And opposed? Nope, that's carried. Thank you.
Easy enough.
Number 4 on page 541, Islands Cleanup, additional funding base budget. So this is B Islands and F Islands. And Director Stanford.
I just have a question about whether or not there's been any consideration of looking at coordinating efforts with Metro Vancouver, because they do also have an island pickup in the Howe Sound area. It's not every year, but there might be some thoughts to that. It doesn't have to be talked about right now, but looking at the budget, there may be some cost effective coordination efforts. So it's more just a comment. And I would like to move that the item Islands Cleanup be approved and incorporated into 2023 round 2 budget.
Thank you, and I have seconders for that. This is voting all because it's regional solid waste. So I don't, oh, my apologies. Director McMahon.
Quick comment. It always looks like a lot of money because it shows up in our budget, whereas the curbside collection for the whole rest of the region, which is weekly, as opposed to this, which is annual. I mean, an annual level of service is pretty cool if you can get away with it. So thank you.
Thank you. Don't see any other hands up, so I will call the question. This is voting all. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Moving on to item number 5 on page 542, Future Waste Disposal Option Analysis, Phase 2. Director Bax.
I'd just like to know, so this is a study to look at the future of our next landfill site.
Thank you for the question. It's to look at all of our options, so not just landfill, but also waste export.
Right, I understand that. And when do you think that this is going to come back to the board for consideration?
So the board's probably going to see a update to the landfill analysis that we currently have a consultant doing towards the end of Q1, start of Q2. So quite soon here, you'll get an update on that. And then I would expect that the remainder of this phase 1 portion of the project will be complete later this year, probably in the fall.
Yeah, just want to express my own feelings and perhaps some of the board that this is a looming issue that we really have to move up the queue in priority, and so I just wanted to let you know that it's on our minds.
Thank you, Director Bax. Director McMahon.
Yes, I'd like to move that this be approved and incorporated in round 2.
Thank you. I've got a seconder for that. I don't see any hands up, so I will call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Opposed? That's carried. Moving on to item number 6 on page 543, Green Waste Program Increased Tonnages. Director McMahon.
Okay, I have one of those historical questions that you're ready for. I thought that there was going to be an audit, basically, of the green waste site last summer to find out who's using it, where they're coming from, what they're putting in there. Is that in the works? Are we going to see that soon?
You're talking about the Gibson's Green Waste. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So that is still on the books. The reason it wasn't completed last summer was due to staffing shortages. So a lot of this will depend on our ability to have attendance at our sites, maintain our operating hours at the Pender Harbor Transfer Station and the Seashell Landfill, and free up someone to spend the time to sit there and conduct a survey.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
Maybe we need some permanent summer students. Sorry. Yeah, I really do have a concern because this is a very important service, but it's also really expensive. And you know, it's the old, if we don't know if we don't have the data, we can't manage the facility. So that said, I would like to move that the budget proposal be approved and incorporated in round 2.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? I do have a seconder for that. Thank you. Director Bax.
I'm just wondering why something like this is not, has no applicable climate action impact. I would think that this type of action that we take as a regional district may be mitigating, like otherwise this stuff would be burned, which would add more carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. Can we parlay that into a grant?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And I guess it's a challenging issue to wrap a concept like that around, because on the one hand, we are diverting organic waste, we're reducing our greenhouse gas emissions, we're maybe preventing some burning. On the other hand, a lot of the cost with this program is associated with the facilitating that the regional district does in processing and hauling and operating the South Coast Green Waste site. So it's hard to kind of say what would happen if we didn't offer the service versus continuing to offer it, and how much of a tonnage decrease we may see going to sailor soils versus burning. And as well, there are options to regulate burning as well that could restrict people's ability to do that. So it's tough to kind of put a tonnage figure on this in terms of greenhouse gas emissions diverted.
Thank you. CFO Pro, I see your hand up.
Just to provide some information, maybe answer the second part of the question, which is regarding grants. So this particular program was started in order to avoid burning on the Sunshine Coast. So there's burning bylaws in several of the electoral areas related to this. So this is essentially just a recognition of service expansion for this particular program. So there's obviously an uptake, and we saw an uptake definitely since COVID. As far as grants, we are actually, this is a contracted service that's provided by a third party. So typically grants are associated with infrastructure, so not program or ongoing operations. We have explored partnering grants with this particular entity. However, they haven't quite timing and whatnot has not lined up, but I know we are in continuous conversations with the service provider to see where there are some coastal opportunities associated with green waste and innovative ways for us to reduce our footprint from a landfill side. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Henderson?
Thank you. To clarify on page 543, and perhaps this goes through several of the documents, at the bottom, we reference the future base budget increases. What I'm curious about is that, are you signaling to us that if we approve this at 140,000 for this year, is there going to be that plus 115? Or is next year 117? Do you follow me?
CFO Pro?
Is it 117 or is it 257 next year?
Yeah, so I think in 2024, the base budget increase will be 117,000. Now, there's also a contract associated with this particular one, so depending, and I don't know, maybe the manager can identify. If we were in a stage of having to renew the contract, then we would have to, all these numbers would be subject to change. So this is to recognize an increase. So I don't believe it's 140 plus 117. We're saying that for next year it's 117.
So we're anticipating perhaps that it might come back down next year. Is that, I think that's the gist of the question.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, essentially, we're trying to guess how much tonnage we're gonna see, because this contract is based on the tonnage that we send to Salish Oils. So, we're guesstimating that because we've seen an increase, this past year and going into 2023, that we're gonna continue to see high usage of this service. And so we're trying to buffer that, expectation that there may be additional funding required for the service in the contract.
You okay for the moment, or do you have a follow-up?
Okay, yeah, so we don't know, we're making our best estimate for 2024.
That's
But I
correct.
would like it clarified, is it gonna be 140 plus or not, because I hear some uncertainty, so, yeah.
Yeah, and I believe when we ran these numbers, it is the base budget for the year, so what's in the base budget now for 2023, plus that additional increase. So it's not gonna be 140 plus 117 plus 147 on top of that.
Okay.
I guess fundamentally, yeah, that's a good point. This 140,000 that's being requested is not the total cost of the green waste program. It's just an amount for increased tonnage.
That's
And
correct.
so this is basically a one-time ask for 2023.
That's correct.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm trying, thank you, that's what I'm
Okay.
wanting to clarify.
We got there in the end. Thank you. Director McMahon?
Yeah, just two further points for those who are new to here. Another consideration of this program is invasive plants, because in my area, what people have been doing with invasive plants like Himalayan blackberry and ivy and a few others is dumping them down ravines where they just spread. And it is way better for people to be disposing of it at the green waste facility, though of course the province doesn't support us in this. The other thing is that until we do a proper audit of who's using the service, we can't look at any kind of different fee structure. Because there's been some interesting suggestions about how to perhaps get some more revenue. And we need to do the groundwork first before we can look at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Lee?
Thank you, Chair. I was following the discussion, I thought, but I think I have to ask the question a different way about this 140,000. The tonnage for, the reason I'm asking is that the tonnage for green waste has been going up every year. Therefore, our base budget's been going up every year. The way I read this is that we're adding 140,000 to the 2023 base budget. It'll stay there. And because we're anticipating more tonnage in 2024, we're anticipating another increase of 117,000, which we will approve in 2024. My question is, do I have that scenario correct?
That's not what I heard from this, but Manager Soul, yeah.
Yeah, so it's... Thanks. So it's the 140,000 increase for 2023, and then whatever the base budget is for 2024, it's an additional 117,000, assuming that we're going to see additional tonnage coming in as this service continues.
This is a one-time ask. Yeah, Director Lee, follow up?
Quite confused why we would do this. So then, the assumption for 2024 is that we will be asking for 257,000, because the tonnage will go up from,
No,
let's say, 100 to 110 to 120 in
No.
the succeeding years. So how can that logic not
this isn't,
hold?
because this isn't the complete budget. A couple of years ago, we were seeing tonnages well in excess of what the contract and the budget contemplated. And so we added an increased amount for tonnage a couple of years ago, but it's very variable. So this $140,000 isn't what we pay for tonnage, period, full stop. It's just what we're seeing in excess of what that contract contemplated. And so what we're seeing this year isn't necessarily what we're gonna see next year, isn't necessarily what we're gonna see the year after that. Go ahead.
Yes, it is, but I'm okay.
Director Henderson.
Thank you. Yes, I agree with Director Lee. Let's hope the tonnage goes down. But on a slightly different but highly related topic, anytime I see haulage, tonnage, transportation, and I'm aware that some people have to buy gas and diesel at very high prices, how have we contemplated, or does the contract provide for increases due to what I assume will be very significant increases in the hauler's
sorry.
costs?
I think that's outside of the scope of,
Well,
where we
in
can
terms
talk
of the
about-
budget, I would suggest I raised it, you can take that under
CFO Perot.
advisement.
Yeah, I think because this particular service is within a contract and likely will result in us having to renew, go into negotiations, I think we can have those types of questions and answered in a closed session would be advisable.
Thank you.
Okay.
Director McMahon.
Do we have a motion on the floor yet?
Not yet.
Oh, good. I'm going to make one, that the following budget proposal be approved and incorporated into round two.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Okay, thank you. That's on the floor. CAO McKinley, I see your hand up.
Yes, and it's really just a minor point of clarification on the invasive species allowed to be dropped off at green waste, just for clarification. So you can drop off blackberry at the green waste facility, but you cannot drop off giant hogweed, knotweed, leafy spurge, or scotch broom.
Thank you.
Those have to go to the landfill.
Thank you. Director Gabias.
Thank you, Chair. Would you be so kind as to explain to me what this $140,000 will cover? Like, what is it for? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. So approximately 90,000 of this is the processing that we would pay for, and 50,000 is the hauling from the South Coast Green Waste Depot.
South Coast Depot being the one located in Gibsons, of course, just in case directors were unaware that there was one in Gibsons. I don't see any other hands up, so I will call the question. This is voting all those in favor? And opposed? Directors White, Bax, and Lee opposed. The motion's carried. Thank you. Item number 7 on page 544, Pender Harbor Transfer Station Upgrades Phase 2. Director Lee, I assume?
Thank you, Chair. This is a continuation of a program we started fairly years ago. And so I would propose option number 1 incorporated into the 2023 round 2 budget.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? I do, thank you. I don't see any other hands up. I know that for the new directors, the description that's here may be a little light, but as Director Lee mentioned, this is sort of the next phase of an ongoing upgrade at the Pender Harbor Transfer Station. We do have some reports that came to us at previous committee meetings talking about the state of the facility and the state of the work that was, or the quantity of the work that was necessary to bring it up to health and safety standards. So I don't see any other hands up, so I will call the question. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to item number 8 on page 544, Seashelt Landfill Extending Useful Life. Director McMahon.
Well, if we can do that, talking of bangs for the buck, this is a bargain. So I would like to move that this budget proposal be approved and incorporated in round 2.
Thank you, and I've got seconders for that. Director Bax.
Just a question as to what is this for actual construction?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So it's not construction, it's completing the feasibility of the project as well as the RFP process that would occur later this year.
This is all the background work that has to go into it. Thank you. I don't see any other hands up, so we'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? No, that's carried. Thank you. And moving on to item number 9, BioCover Feasibility Pilot Phase 2 Additional Funding. This is on page 545, $136,000 to be funded from operating reserves. Director Gabias.
Thank you, Chair. Let me just go back here. Okay, I'm just curious about the statement that a BioCover would provide economic benefits to the SCRD and the community. Could you expand on that for me? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So part of this BioCover is going to use biosolids from the Seashelt wastewater treatment plant. So there is a benefit to the district of Seashelt to have a solution nearby to get rid of their biosolids. There's also savings associated with this BioCover option over a conventional final cover system. And so that will save the regional district somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 million versus conventional cover.
Thank you. Director Bax.
Just a couple questions. This is a type of BioCover that's been used in this type of situation before?
That's correct.
With great success, I imagine. It's a climate action impact as well. Is there any grants available? I imagine you've already looked through that. So at this point, is this another study or is this actual work?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So it is actual work. It's just over a small area to assess how functional it is on the site.
The idea being that when the final closure of the landfill takes place, if this is feasible, this is where that $1 million savings could be realized. Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I have several questions, but my first one is, I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we are actually turning methane into CO2. Methane is multiple times more harmful to the environment than CO2. I think it's like a 12-to-1. So this is really a very much an understated but important project for our environment. Do I have that part right?
That's correct.
Oh, thank you. Then we cover already, but not with a BioCover, I guess just normal old gravel. So are we going to see a cost reduction in some other part, or have we been approving each section as we covered it?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So final cover is a sort of permanent cap that covers the top of the landfill. And the idea is that it doesn't allow water to percolate through the cap and continue to generate as much leachate over time. So it is a different type of cover compared to the daily cover, which is just dirt that buries the garbage on the site.
Go ahead.
This is this is placing like the dirt part of the cover then, and we'll still be putting the permanent over it?
No, so this would be the part of the permanent cap that would form the encapsulating cap of the landfill at the end of its life when we're closing and no longer adding garbage.
Thank you. Director Henderson.
Thank you, Chair. Just to be clear, this is a top-up to the budget, the cost of this project.
Yes.
Right, this is the request. So this proposal is to fund it from reserves. Where's the rest of the money coming from?
The $150,000 that was previously approved, I believe was to come out of reserves, but I would look over at CFO Perot.
I don't know the answer. I'd have to double check.
Okay,
Thank
thanks, if you would.
If it came from taxation, though, that is prior taxation that has already been levied and set aside for this project.
Yes, but then if it's not spent, it should be in our reserves.
Right. Director Gavias?
Thank you, Chair. I'm just very curious about this project. And I looked it up. I looked up biocovers, and it seems like there's different ways of doing it. Which approach is the SCRD taking with that?
Yes, and I may let Manager Soji speak to that specifics.
Thank you for the question. The design that was presented in the phase 1 study was prepared by XCG, our consultants. I'm not overly familiar with the exact design. It's a mix of biosolids, gravel, and soil, and so I'm not sure how that compares to the other systems that you've reviewed.
Go for it.
This might be just crazy, but we just talked about green waste, and I'm just wondering if there's a way to use that green waste that we haul. I don't know. Just trying to find ways to use all this green waste that we produce. And I thought maybe it could be incorporated. Crazy? Maybe.
I don't know if you want to speculate on that at this time, or it might be a question for later or offline. So, Director Henderson? Okay.
Well, I will just say, I think that's a really good question and a good topic for later, because there may well be some synergies with what we're doing, in addition to what you're proposing. So, no criticism whatsoever. Thanks.
Director Bax.
I'm going to bring this up one more time, that this type of work, in my mind, should be eligible for some type of grants from other upper-level government agencies. Is that, I imagine, can you answer that has been explored? Or,
Staff always explore the opportunities for grants when applicable.
and so,
Landfills are rarely eligible for granting opportunities,
okay.
unfortunately.
I've learned something new today. Thank you, Chair.
I only know that answer because we've asked it in previous meetings. Director Lee.
Going back, but we did get a report on the biocover and what it was, and I believe it's coming from Salish Soils, and it does include whatever they can put into that dirt, and I think it's part of the green waste as well, but we'd have to check, but it's really irrelevant at this point.
I've added it to my parking lot to circulate that report to the directors
Thank
after
you.
the meeting.
Thank you,
So
Chair.
if as long as we can get to the end of the meeting. Director McMahon?
Right, do we have a motion on the floor?
No, we do
Oh,
not.
good. I move that this be approved and incorporated into round 2.
Thank you. And I've got a seconder for that, a couple of them. Okay. I don't see any other hands up, so I will call the Director McMahon.
I have a comment, but after the vote.
I will call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Director White opposed? That's carried, thank you. Director McMahon?
Yeah, I'm just taking a look at our landfill closure reserves, which are at the top of page 547. And I just wanted to point out to the new directors that if we are able to get another 3 years out of the landfill, that puts us in a much better situation in terms of reserves. So keep your fingers crossed, everyone.
Without providing a whole lot of context into like the stage H closure and things like that, you may have just opened a big can of worms pointing out that reserve, but something to follow up with offline. That takes us to the end of this annex. So we are moving on to annex, that's the end of solid waste, thank you. So we're gonna move on to annex FFF, which is the North Pender Harbor Water Service. Director Bax?
I was gonna ask, as I don't see our director from the Seashell Nation in attendance today, that, and I see that they are part of this group, would it be better for us to consider this at another time? When Director Paul is in attendance?
I don't believe so. Yeah,
Okay, just asking.
unless somebody's gonna make a motion to that effect, but
They're not even in the function.
they,
Well, it says they are.
yeah. So. But now that I've got the question coming from this side of the table, it's showing here, voting as Area A and SNGD, but I think Area A is the participant, and it's a single participant, which makes it voting all, I believe. Staff are having a quick check. But in the meantime, Manager Walkie, or did you want to give a high-level introduction to any of the water items, or are you happy to just take questions if they come?
I'll just do a quick introduction. The Utility Services Division serves three water service areas. 365, which is North Pender Harbor, which is the Garden Bay area and Downian Point. 366, which is South Pender, that's Madeira Park, Francis Peninsula area. And then the regional service area is 370, and that does basically everywhere else. In the regional service area, that includes Langdale, Soames Point, Grantham's Landing, and at the other end of the coast, Egmont and Cove Cay. And of course, the regional system in the middle is known as Chapman Water System. The proposals that you see today are all important initiatives to continue to operate, maintain, and upgrade the water system's assets as efficiently as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just looking for confirmation on the voting on this particular service.
Thank you, Chair. So North Pender does include Area A, and there is a pocket for the nation. So the nation would be part of that vote for North Pender.
But given that they're not here today, it is voting all, I
Correct.
believe. Yeah, okay. Okay, so, that being said, we're looking on page 548, project number 1, Garden Bay Treatment Plant Improvements, preliminary and pre-design work. $200,000 to be funded from operating reserves. Director Lee.
I wish we didn't have to do this. This is going to be eventually a approximate $9 million project, but it is a health and safety issue. So I am going to make a recommendation, motion on number 1, approved and incorporated.
Thank you, and I have a seconder for that. I don't see any other, I don't see any other hands up, so I will call, Director Henderson.
Director Lee just caught my attention with $9 million. So in approving this, are we committing ourselves to anything going forward?
Not specifically at this time. This is the pre-design work that's necessary to look at treatment upgrades for that water system.
Yeah, I just wanted that on the record, thanks.
Thank you. Director Bax.
Yeah, is this gonna be taxation for Area A only, or is it gonna be, what's the funding model here? Operating reserves, is that gonna be from,
Function 365 is Area A.
is Area A only? And
Yeah.
so these are the people that are gonna be paying for it by themselves?
Yep.
I can't support accepting it at this moment. I would prefer it referred to round two to give the member from Seashell Nation a chance to have his 2 cents worth.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands up, so I will call the question. All those in favor? And opposed? Director Bax opposed. The motion's carried. Thank you. And moving on to, that's it for North Pender. So thank you very much. Moving on to Annex GGG, South Pender Water Service. I believe Manager Waukee gave us a sufficient introduction to cover this one too. So we're looking at page 551, item number 1, dam safety upgrades to McNeil Lake Dam, additional funding. This is Area A and A alone. So I will look to the director from Area A for direction.
Thank you, Chair. I have one question. This was originally proposed as a problem with the dam for earthquake, but I don't believe that's any longer the issue. It was found that that wasn't a problem. So I'm thinking that we must be talking about the walkway on the top of the dam as a safety issue for people working to maintain the dam. Do I have that correct?
Go ahead, want to answer? Thank you for the question. Yes, these are all pertain to safety upgrades that were identified by, at the last detailed review of the dams. So this is elevating the walkway. It also includes replacing the low-level outlet gate and installing some log booms. So they are all safety related to preserve and extend the life of the asset.
Director Lee.
Sorry, I'm just taking time to think because it's a tough year this year, and if I propose to put it to 24, am I putting people at risk and the operation of the dam at risk? And I don't know the answer to that question. Maybe
Yeah,
staff could advise me on that part of it. In other words, if I put it, if we put it off to 2024, what would the risk be to the facility and to the operators?
I guess just before I give staff the opportunity to answer that, I mean, we are looking at a funding source of gas tax on this particular project. So whether you fund it in 2023 or 2024, it's still coming potentially from the same funding source, which is gas tax. So I don't know that deferring it would have any benefit other than to free up staff work plan this year. I don't think it's going to have a financial implication for us. I don't know if staff wanted to add to
Yeah, if I could
implications
point-
of deferment.
Thank you, Chair. If I could point out, it's non-discretionary. These are issues with the dam that we've identified that need to be corrected. For example, the walkway was installed too low, so if logs were to get stuck on it, if logs or debris were to go over the dam, the outlet gate is relative to being able to release the right amount of volume of water out of the lake if the lake levels start rising too quickly. So as identified, they're safety, but they're also regulatory. Thank you.
CFO Perot? Oh, okay. Director Lee.
I know we're trying to get over it, so I probably won't debate either issue. Good reasons for my questions, though, so you know. I will go with number one, incorporate into the 2023 round two budget.
Thank you. And I do have a seconder for that. I don't see any other hands up, so I will call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Thank you. And that is the end of South Pender Water Service. Did we just want to take a 7-minute break before we jump into regional water? Okay, so we will be back at 10:30. And welcome back to the SCRD Finance Committee Round 1 budget for January 25th, 2023. We are moving on to Annex HHH, which is 370, the Regional Water Service. I guess we'll just jump right into it. So on page 554, we have item number 1, which is the Church Road Wellfield Project operational costs, $112,196 to be funded from user fees. And this is voting A, B, D, E, F, F Islands and District of Seashelt. Director McMahon.
This looks pretty straightforward to me. We need the well, we have to operate it, so could I please move that this be approved and incorporated in round 2?
Thank you, and I've got a seconder for that. I see Director Henderson's hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Can we just, so this is the end, as it were? We got, is there, does staff anticipate anything more coming before we get this operational? And to that point, when will it be operational?
Thank you for the question through the chair. So yes, we are on the downward slope of the project in the sense that we're moving towards, pump up, start testing and commissioning here over the next month or so. And then, those would just be continued operational costs that you're requesting.
So, given the interest, when do you have a start date for it being fully operational?
Well, so as I mentioned in the water summit, we're still working with the province to get that final approval. Everyone, both at the SCRD staff level as well as the consultant, is working with the province, getting them the required information they're looking for.
And one final thing I just wanted to point out here is on page 554, the 2023 funding's $112,196, but that's actually prorated based on 9 months. So at the top of the next page, it mentions that the 12-month is $149,595. So just, there's that prorated lift. I just wanted to highlight that. So, directors, you did make a motion. I do have a motion on the floor. I don't see any other hands up, so I will call the question. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. And moving on to number 2 on the bottom of page 555, Chapman siphon removal. This is $100,000 funded from user fees. Director McMahon.
Okay, trying to remember where we're at. So the province said they were not going to give us future permits for siphons at the lakes. Is there any upcoming report on this situation? Because I seem to remember that when we heard that, we were going to approach the province and say, until we have a fully secure alternate water supply, we might need to use siphons. We need it as a backup plan. So where do we stand with that?
Thank you, Chair. The existing permit for the siphons expired this October, and so if we were to want to extend the siphons staying there, we would have to do that pretty soon, and that discussion is happening right now with staff about how and when we're going to ask for an extension if that's the decision, and we certainly have relied on the siphons in the most recent years, and I think it would be a good idea to keep them in longer. So I think an application for extension will be going to the province soon.
Follow up?
And when will we be getting a staff report on that? Do you know roughly?
There's not one planned yet. If you're asking for a staff report, you can do that. Thank you, Chair.
Director Lee.
Very interesting topic. I'd like to ask a question and then another question.
Go for it.
Okay. Do we normally take the siphon out in between? I believe we actually leave it in normally.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the siphons have remained in at Chapman since 2017, and the Edwards Lake siphon was installed this year.
Okay, now the next one is kind of technical, probably for our CFO, but user fees are the source of funding listed here. We've already done the user fees, so it would be next year's user fees, I believe.
Nope. You've already, we've already approved the increase that's contemplated here to the user fees for 2023 to pay for this project.
So they're in already.
They're in already.
Okay. And, well, and so if we left the siphon in after October, what would happen to us?
Director Lee, what are you personally will be fine. I'm not sure what you're speculating at with the question. Are you asking
Well-
what would happen if we canceled the project, per se?
Yes, because we need the siphon we need the siphon for a backup. If the world is good next year and we get a break, which we're certain do, we would then be, as an emergency, spending another $100,000 to put the siphon back in, which I believe the government is really slow in approving things when it's not an emergency. So the fact is, you can see where I'm coming from on that. Would we get fined? Would it cost us money? What's the risk of leaving it in?
I'm gonna go to CAO McKinley, but that may be a question you're not gonna get an answer to today. But CAO McKinley?
What I would say is that what we may have here is a requirement for us to potentially have this item before you for consideration, but certainly an advocacy opportunity to have work done with the province to allay to them the seriousness and the need for continuing to have the ability to employ these siphons on an annual basis as we require. And I would think that that would be a very appropriate advocacy opportunity that might make a difference as we entertain this. This is something that we have been more or less required to submit, but it doesn't mean that we don't want the ability to be able to continue to use those on an emergency basis, which have proven to be highly effective as a mitigation tool during our drought response.
Thank you. Director McMahon, you've got a follow-up to that.
Yes, I think what we're trying to get at here is if we approve this budget item, are we approving removal of the siphons, or are those two separate and unrelated decisions?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. In their park use permit, it says that we have to remove the siphons by this October. So if that's the way it goes, we're looking for funding to be able to fulfill our permit.
And if we're not making at least that commitment to provide the funding, I think our chances of being able to use the siphons this year would probably be greatly diminished as well, because that also requires approval from BC Parks if we need to use them. CFO Pro, I see your hand up.
From a general perspective, any financial decisions you're making are to provide approval in the financial plan. So to give authority to do things like contracting or actually implementing. If you don't have it, you actually have no authority to do it, so you'd have to come back and it just slows things up. So they're not necessarily tied. You can still make decisions to not proceed with a project. So although it's in the financial plan, it does say that we intend on doing this, but circumstances could change with any type of project, and so the associated funding would just return to reserves, or whatever source you were going to do wouldn't be executed.
Thank you. Director Bax.
So, so the ramifications of us leaving the siphons into place is that we would open ourselves to fines or something to that effect. I would like to see some type of negotiation take place between the province and the regional district that could slow down this decision.
That's advocacy on our part.
So what I'm wondering is if if we don't approve this, they can't do the work.
Yes.
But we can approve it at a later date.
If we don't approve this, staff don't have the financial means to do this work. We can't approve the work at a later date without the financial means to do the work.
And if we do approve it, and we, and we get permission from the province to leave the siphons in place, then the money just goes back into our general revenue, or
No, this money comes from user fees. It would actually go to reserves,
go to reserves.
for water specifically. Director Henderson?
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me leave my microphone on. I think the solution to this is to approve it what amounts to in principle. I know it's implied that you would come back and seek authority to actually implement, but I'm mindful of what you said, Chair, that we need every leverage we have to negotiate with the province, so let's approve this, but not implement it, because boy, do I agree, I fear we need the siphons in there for the long term. And I hope that Chair Lee and Mayor White will join me in Victoria in the next couple of weeks to start some advocacy.
Director McMahon?
I'm trying to find a middle road at the moment, so I was gonna try out referring this to round 2.
I have a seconder for that. I question the need for referring it to round 2, but I appreciate that it is at least movement. Director Bax?
If this, if we approve this money for the work, will we be notified as to, given advance notice for the work? Will you come back to the board and let us know that now's the time that you're going to commence the work and spend the money? Or is it just going to be something that we're not going to hear about again? If you get my meaning.
If you wanted to answer that question, go for it. I'm not sure that that's a question that's germane to the particular motion, though. And I'm not seeing an interest in answering. Oh, CAO McKinley, I see your hand up. Sorry, you're not physically waving at me, so I don't catch you there.
I'm trying to learn how to use my digital hand properly. It's a work in progress. What I was going to say on the subject of potentially referring the item to round 2 is this something that would be referred to round 2 with some type of condition placed upon it? As we sit here at the table, we're not sure if there's additional work that would be requested of staff between now and round 2. Is it subject to additional staff information? Is it subject to some type of advocacy work that may be initiated by the board between round 1 and round 2? Or is it just, we'll kick it to round 2 and we'll revisit it then? More just looking for some clarification.
Director McMahon, you made the motion. I invite you to comment.
Well, there's really 2 things going on here. One is to completely clarify what our situation is with these siphons, and perhaps, a report or an update at a coming meeting would be an appropriate way to do that, so that everybody clearly understands what the situation is, both us and the public. And the other part is sort of a petulant dragging my heels, because I'm very reluctant to approve this, even though I know that we need to. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Lee?
Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry to drag this out. I am in favor of going forward because we are collecting the money. So that's inevitable. We would return the money next year as a consideration for the fees we set next year. So I'm okay with that if we don't go ahead. But I believe that there's a desire by the board to have the siphon left in place And so I'm not at all sure if that's a staff function to approach the province and say, we want to change this, or whether we need to write a letter, the board needs to write a letter and ask for it. So this is probably the right place to ask that question.
And I'm seeing some indication from staff that it's the latter, not the former. So, CAO McKinley?
Yeah, I think it would be, if the board wanted to direct that a letter be written on the board's behalf advocating for being able to keep the siphons as a means of drought management on an annual basis as required, staff would be happy to follow that direction.
Thank you. Director Lee?
So could we put an and that at the existing motion, or would you like a new one?
I'd like to deal with the letter or the advocacy separately from whether this moves forward to round 2 or gets incorporated. I think they're separate. The advocacy work needs to be done. I don't think any of us doubt that. The question is whether we're going to move this to round 2 or not, or incorporate, or what have you. So, Director McMahon.
And this is also possibly a separate item, but I would like to have a full discussion about this at an upcoming meeting, because this is not the time to dive into all of the details of the siphon and our relationship with the province. But I would like to have that full discussion at an upcoming board meeting so that we're all on the same page and we clearly understand where we're going.
That's fair. Director Bax to the motion on the floor?
No.
Okay, thank you. I, like a couple of the directors, I don't support moving this to round 2. I think, we need to make the commitment if we expect to even have BC Parks or the province look at our request. And I think kicking it down the road is just providing uncertainty through this process. So I don't have any other hands up, so I will call the question on referring this to round 2. All those in favor? Those opposed? That's defeated. Thank you. Director Bax.
I recommend that we approve and incorporate it into the 2023 budget round 2.
Thank you. I have a seconder for that. And I don't see any other hands up, so I will call the question. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. I believe there is one more recommendation that somebody may wish to make regarding advocacy efforts. And letters to the province. Director Lee?
Thank you, Chair. I am very tempted to do that, but Director McMahon suggested perhaps that we would pass a motion to put it on a future agenda before doing that. So I'd like clarification from Director McMahon, if I could, please.
Go ahead.
Yes, I think we really should have the full discussion, either at, I don't know, I think we have a very big agenda for tomorrow. So when is the next available board meeting to which we can add it to the agenda? That would be February 9th?
I question whether we want to have a fulsome discussion at committee or board.
Cal? Cal, February 9th? Okay. In that case, I'd like to move that staff add this item to the February 9th Cal agenda
For discussion.
for discussion and information.
Okay. And I've got a seconder for that. I don't see any other hands up, so I will call the question. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. I think we've flogged that topic to death for the moment. So we're going to move on to item number 3 on page 556, which is the Chapman Creek Water Treatment Plant UV upgrade Phase 2 construction. $1.9 million to be funded under short-term loan. For the directors who may be new to this process, I wonder if staff could give just a 2-minute highlight into what's gotten us to this stage.
Thank you, Chair. The Chapman Treatment Plant was built in 2006, and right near the end of construction, UVs became required for the treatment plant. So one UV unit was installed in a pipe near the discharge of the plant in a concrete channel. It's a sump, and that UV's been in service for 17 years, and we're having troubles with it now, and we need to replace it. And the plan is to replace it with twin UVs so that if one breaks down, we can have the other one working. UV is part of the disinfection process at the treatment plant. After it's UV'd, ultraviolet light, it has chlorine added to it. And that's another project we're working on right now, is the sodium hypochlorite rather than gas. So what we run into with the design of this is that it's become much more challenging than we originally thought. You just pull one out, put two in, kind of thing. It's really getting complicated with the sand filter drawdown levels. These UV units have to be below the sand filters, which is down in this channel, and there's a lot more work required now to install them, including coring concrete and removing concrete. That's why the project cost has increased so much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that introduction. Director Henderson.
Thank you. Through you, how often do we actually need the UV filtration, or UV treatment, I should say?
I believe it's online 24 hours a day, but I will
So
defer to staff.
rephrase, how often do we need to use it?
Thank you, Chair. It's part of our operating permit to have UV as part of our disinfection, and the Chapman plant runs 24 hours a day, so those lights are on 24 hours a day. So it's challenging to do maintenance on it because you have to pull the whole plant down to do maintenance on it.
Yeah, it's a requirement for water treatments. My own personal, project, I've got UV treatment that I had to install as part of that project, so it is a regulatory requirement. Director
I'm
Bax?
not sure that's correct.
Thank you. Director Bax?
Just to keep things light, how often do projects like this come in under budget?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Our goal is to always have projects come under budget.
Nice light answer to a nice light question. Yeah, just for a little bit of background, this project has already expanded in scope, as Manager Waukee mentioned. It's moved beyond what was originally hoped would be the scope of the project because of complications, so.
So not very often.
Every project is a unique kettle of fish. Director McMahon.
In the last 2 years, I think we've seen a lot more projects come in over budget due to global issues and skyrocketing costs and so forth. There certainly wasn't a lot of that going on 5 years ago. Anyway, I'd like to move that this be approved and incorporated into round 2.
Thank you, and I'll second that. Director Henderson, I see your hand up.
Thank you. Could we get perhaps from the CFO an indication of what is the impact of repaying this loan on future water rates?
Thank you.
Sorry for the detailed question, but.
Thank you. I have just actually flagged that about 15 minutes ago, as it was omitted, so I'm inquiring myself, so I can get back to the directors on that. It was reflected in the user rate report, so it was contemplated in the user fees that were approved back in December.
And I believe I think you just answered the question, but the rates that we approved for regional water do include the loan financing and interest and all of that for this project?
Yes, they do, and it is also with an estimation of when the actual project will be completed. So with this type of size of project, we typically would include a very small sum, likely in 2023 rates, with a full implication. So likely this will hit largely in the 2024 rate review, which was exactly depicted. So I don't have the numbers right in front of me on my tip of my finger yet, but those were presented as part of the rate reports.
Thank you. This was prorated for 2023. Okay.
Right, but
Director Henderson?
thank you. But we actually only partially caught up on what we need to operate the water. If the board will remember, I think we had choices of 25, 50, and 100% catch-up, or sorry, 25, 50, and 100% increases, and we settled, I believe, on the 25% approximately. So this is, I guess I want everybody to realize, again, this is where we approve something. There's a small part in this year, but there's a lot more coming in future years.
Yep, very valid comments. And there are always projects that are coming on, falling off as well, because I think a couple of years ago I had a sort of a moment, that light bulb moment of, there's a lot of big capital projects coming up in really short order, and what is that gonna do to our rates? So, yeah, there's a lot in the background that feeds into this. CFO Perot?
Yeah, just a very brief comment, Chair, that's part of the water rate study that is being undertaken right now, is to move towards a water rate structure that depicts a larger outlook to what the rates are going to be. And of course, there are a lot of things in motion associated with that. So right now we're kind of looking on a year-by-year basis. So looking to provide more outlook. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's it for my speakers list. And I think I've got a motion on the floor to approve and incorporate this. So I will call the question. This is voting, what is the voting on this one? Sorry. Yeah, regional water. Okay. Right, voting. Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, Director Henderson opposed. That's carried. Thank you. And next up, we have on 557, project number 4, Chapman Creek Water Treatment Plant Chlorine Gas Decommissioning. $65,000 to be funded from user fees. Director McMahon.
Yes, I'd like to move to approve and incorporate in round 2.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Seconded. Any other discussion on the motion? If not, I will call the question. All those in favor? That's carried. Opposed? Sorry, I didn't call for opposed. Okay, that's carried. Thank you. Item number 5 on page 558. Dam safety upgrades to Chapman and Edwards Lakes. Construction cost increases. $322,000 to be funded from capital reserves. Director Gabias.
I guess I'm gonna move that the following budget proposal be approved and incorporated into the 2023 round 2 budget.
Thank you, and I've got a seconder for that. Any discussion or questions on the motion? If not, I will call the question. All those in favor? Those opposed? Director Bax opposed. Motion's carried. Page 559, number 6, Egmont Water Treatment Plant Feasibility Study and Preliminary Development. So $275,000 to be funded from a combination of operating reserves and capital reserves. For directors that may not know, Egmont is part of the Regional Water Service, which is why it's on here. Director Lee?
Yes, this is a necessary thing that needs doing. So I would propose number 1, approve and incorporate into the 2023 round 2 budget.
Thank you, and I have a seconder for that. I don't see any other hands up, so I will call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Moving on to item number 7 on page 561. Chaster Well Upgrades, Well Protection Plan Phase 2 additional funding. $78,500 funded from capital reserves. Director McMahon.
Since I live just down the street from the well, and this is being hovering out there for several years. I remember there was a report on all our wells about 3 or 4 years ago, identifying upgrades that need to be done, so I'm happy to move this to be approved and incorporated into round 2.
Thank you, and I've got a seconder for that. I don't see any other hands up, so I will call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Item number 8 on page 561, Church Road Wellfield Compliance Monitoring. $200,000 funded from user fees. Director Stanford, did I see you raise your hand?
I move that this be approved and incorporated into the 2023 round 2 budget.
And that's been seconded, thank you. I just have one question from the description, or the rationale that's listed here. It says that one of the conditions of the wellfield water license is to undertake several years of impact and compliance monitoring. So is this something that we see, like I see 23, 24, do we know an estimated end time at this point, or is that gonna come when we receive our final license?
Thank you for the question through the chair. That's to be determined from the province based on the information we gather over the period of 2 years. They'll be in particular looking for fish habitat assessment, stuff like that, impacts, and also groundwater impacts and stuff like that, with a long time monitoring of the operation of the new Church Road well field.
Okay,
Thank you for the question.
thank you. Director Bax.
When you say long-term monitoring, so the province is compelling us to monitor at this level of financial commitment for a 2-year period, at which point will they sign off on it, or will they demand more monitoring, or will it become an annual thing, or will it drag on for a long time?
Thank you for the question through the chair. So we are hoping that it won't be a long-term, after a couple of years. The minimum requirement now is for 2 years, and based on the information and, their review of the information provided, they'll make a determination in consultation with us and our hydrologist on the
2 years for now,
impacts.
subject to change
That's
once more
correct.
information comes back.
Follow-up.
Follow-up?
Yeah, just want to know, the $200,000 is going to cover us for 2 years?
It's for 2 years for each year, 200,000.
Okay, so we're talking about a
2023.
commitment of $400,000.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Director Henderson.
Or perhaps longer on that. Are there any other costs that you're aware of as yet with Church Road and the operating costs? I'm concerned that we're getting bits and pieces, and I know it's a new project, but these are the things that factor into any capital project decision.
Thank you for the question through the chair. At this point, no, we're comfortable with what's been provided to date to the province and stuff like that, the information. It's a, what would I say, a fluid situation, no pun intended, but, we provide the information, we gather the information, we provide it to the province, and then they comment and review it and get back to us. It doesn't preclude them from asking for more information, but once, we've been endeavoring to try to satisfy their requirements.
Yeah, and with respect to the province, I understand. I'm wondering if there's any unknowns out there in addition to this particular one related to getting the Church Road into full operation. Are you
At
still?
this point, we're comfortable with where we're at currently, because the end, at least at this construction phase, is in sight, as I mentioned earlier.
Mhm.
If we knew they'd be on this agenda, hopefully. So,
That's why I'm
'cause-
asking.
and if we don't know, we don't know. This is a new project, so. I don't see any other hands up. Oh, Director Bax, just in the nick of time.
Is there a motion on the floor?
There is a motion on the floor to approve and incorporate, which I am just about to call. So we'll call the question. All those in favor? And opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much. Item number 9 on page 562, Chapman Creek Water Treatment Plant Mechanical Equipment Upgrades, $135,000 to be funded from capital reserves. Director McMahon.
Yes, perfect example of what capital reserves are for, so I'd like to move that this be approved and incorporated in round 2.
Thank you, and I have a seconder for that. I don't see any other hands up, so I will call the question. All those in favor? Thank you, that's carried. And item number 10, on page 563, exposed water main rehabilitation Chapman intake line, new project. 220,000 funded from capital reserves. Director McMahon.
I would like to move to approve and incorporate into round 2.
Thank you, and I have a seconder for that. Director Bax.
Well, just a couple of questions, and I know this may be end up in operations, but the idea is that the support system for these intake pipes are rusting out. Is that correct?
Thank you for the question through the chair. So this past summer, we actually had completed a structural assessment from a structural engineer of what we call a trestle structure that actually supports the primary intake line to the water treatment plant. And we identified improvements that needed to be done. This is the first time it's been structurally assessed since it was constructed almost 40 years ago. So there was identified deficiencies, such as it actually is a steel structure that sits on footings in a creek bed, so there were deterioration of the footings, for example, that need to be addressed and improved. And then also just the entire painted structure on top, which is a catwalk to the water intake line, needs to be repainted and stuff like that. And then there's also cathodic protection. So that's what this project would do, is fund all those improvements.
So some concrete work and some painting.
Concrete work and cathodic protection as well, basically to prevent further rusting of the pipe and stuff like that, especially where it goes over the creek.
Okay, thank you.
Areas.
Thank you for your answer.
Manager Waukee, you wanted to add to that?
Thank you, Chair. If I could just add context for people to understand, this is the trestle up by Chapman Waterfalls. If you've ever walked to the waterfalls, you're walking across those trestles. And one other part of the project is some geotechnical work in that sloped area underneath the trestles, because we've had problems in the past nearby. Thank you.
Thank you. Directors, any other? Nothing? I have a motion on the floor. Yeah, so I do have a motion on the floor to approve and incorporate. I will call the question. All those in favor? Thank you, that's carried. And on 564, item number 11, Seashell Nation Government District Zone Metering, $250,000 to be funded from capital reserves. Director Henderson.
Thank you, Chair. I guess a procedural question, looking over so I don't. Why is SNGD not voting on this, not included in the voting?
SNGD does not form a participant of the Regional Water Service. Getting a nod from my corporate officer, so I think I got that right.
And yet we provide, or they receive water from us?
Yes.
Under what auspices? To continue the education?
Thank you, Director White.
Last century.
Director White, did you want to comment on that? Agreements that predate the organization. Yeah, Union Steamship Agreement.
Right, I mean, that's, the point is we're providing water, and we have to pay for the metering of the water that they are getting the benefit of. Thanks.
This project is discretionary. We don't have to meter the water that
Oh, no,
the
no, we have to
nation-
meter the water.
Technically speaking, it is discretionary. Yeah, directors, any other comments or recommendations? Director McMahon?
Yes, I'd like to move we approve and incorporate into round 2.
Thank you. I have a seconder for that. I don't see any other hands up, so I will call the question. All those in favor? Thank you, that's carried. Item number 12 on page 565, generators purchase for various sites, $375,000 funded from gas tax. I guess this is very specific. I guess I've got a question perhaps for CFO Perot, because this is funding from gas tax, but it's regional water service. So is the District of Seashelt not contributing to this project?
That in essence would be true for the, for all participants of the service, where we are suggesting that these particular generators be recovered through some of the rural area or electoral area gas tax. And some of the thought was, and this is where if we can't use or can't find generators that match the criteria for gas tax, such as propane related, something that's more energy efficient, or it doesn't use diesel, essentially. That's the goal. So if that wouldn't be the case, we'd have to come back with alternative funds. But yes, you're right. The other participants wouldn't be contributing and would, I think, reduce the financial burden on users, essentially, because we're not using reserves and we're not asking for user fees.
Director Bax.
Two questions. How many generators are we talking? And what is the split of the gas tax between the different areas that's going to be asked of us?
There's a little more information on page 566 at the top when it talks about the generators that are being suggested for purchase.
566 at the top.
I would suggest if a higher level of detail is germane to the, passing or making a movement on this, that perhaps we refer it to round 2, because I have personally speaking, I have a little bit of concern with the rural areas funding this and the District of Seashelt not contributing. This is regional water. And if that means that the SCRD should make a request to the District of Seashelt Council as part of its budget process for a contribution, then so be it. But I don't know if that's a level of detail we want to go into at this time. Director CFO Pro, I see your hand up. Yeah, just as far as detail. Microphone.
As far as detail goes, on page 269, but I think there's a replacement for the amended agenda. There's a reconciliation of the estimated gas tax commitment of funding that was provided earlier in the agenda. And so this particular project was articulated in the summary of potential proposals for board commitment.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
Yes, I need to go back and look at that amended agenda table, because I don't remember us discussing this in our original discussion of the gas tax for the rural areas. So I want to clearly see what the implications are.
Director Bax.
I'd move to refer this to round 2 budget.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Seconded. Thank you. Director McMahon, I see your hand up. Is that a residual? Okay. I don't see any other hands up, so I will call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. That's carried. Looking at item number 13 on page 566, Eastbourne Groundwater Supply Expansion Phase 2. $1.2 million to be funded through a combination of resources. Director Bax.
Once again, I don't know what the implications are to the particular fund of gas tax that I would like to use for projects within my district.
CFO Pro.
So this particular project is similar, but not exactly the same as the prior project. And so again, in the summary of the gas tax, this particular one is proposing to use Area F gas tax because this particular project is on the area of islands. In essence, it does reduce the impact or reduce the need to increase user rates or parcel tax for this particular service. Again, these particular projects too were reflected and the funding source as part of your user rate and parcel tax. So these were contemplated. If we use other sources of funding, we'll have to come back with what the implication to that is if we use other sources.
Thank you. Director Stamford? Oh, I'm sorry. Before I go to you, Director Stamford, CAO McKinley, I see your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And just in addition to the CFO's comments, the flexibility to use occasionally gas tax funds for regional projects is consistent with your existing gas tax policy. So it's something that you can choose to do from time to time as you choose.
Thank you.
And we can request funding through that way as well. We can also request funding through the member munis to supplement.
Okay, thank you. Director Stamford?
I would like to move that this be approved and incorporated into the 2023 round 2 budget. But I also have a request that, is there any way I could look at previous reports to get a sense of the background of this particular?
I will make a note of that, and we will
Yes.
absolutely make sure that those
Thank
are
you.
circulated, because there is a great sum of data on the Eastbourne system that the
Great,
previous
thank you.
board received. And I did see a seconder for that motion. Director McMahon?
Yes, in summary, it keeps getting more expensive. I realize this is not completely pertinent, but I went back and I found the allocation of gas tax for the previous item, and it's equally divided between the areas, but gas tax is received on a per capita basis. So that's not
Perfect
an
opportunity to discuss that at
equitable-
round 2, I think.
Yes, so
Yeah.
I'm just flagging that for attention in
Yeah.
round 2, thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands. Well, I see Director Stamford's hand up still? Okay. I don't see any other hands up, so I will call the question on that. All those in favor? And those opposed? Director McMahon and Henderson opposed. The motion's carried. Thank you. And next up, we have on page 567, item number 14, the pneumatic boring tool. 57,200 funded through short-term loan MFA, which is not recommended. Director Bax?
Well, I know everybody loves a new tool like this. So the existing tool that the crews are using right now is still functioning? Is this why it's not a recommended add-on?
Thank you, Chair. The current tool that they use is called a mole. It's about 30 years old. It's hydraulically driven, and it pushes rods underneath the road, and then they thread them together and push another rod, push another rod. It's tired. It's had its day. What's used nowadays is what's called a hog, and it's a bullet type unit attached to an air hose, and it pushes the service lines underneath the road rather than having to use this mole that we have right now. So the mole's very old and keeps having hydraulic issues.
I believe at pre-budget I had also asked about, because it's mentioned here that there'd be less, smaller excavations required, there could be archaeology impacts by upgrading to a more compact tool. Director McMahon?
I remember we discussed this at pre-budget, which now seems like a very long time ago. But was it suggested that we defer this for a year? Was that really staff's suggestion, or were we going to abandon the mole or the hog, or both?
Great question, Director McMahon. I also don't remember the original recommendation from staff. Was it to just abandon and come back to us at a later date maybe, or was there a recommendation originally that it be looked at in subsequent years?
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't in attendance at pre-budget, but I sure would like a new hog.
CFO Pro?
It was really in recognition that there's a lot on the docket here and that we haven't really contemplated this in the user rate or financial analysis as part of what was approved. And it was contemplated that it could likely be contemplated for the next year. So it was just weighing the more pertinent with the more discretionary. So I think that's just what staff put forward, that it was a project that's non-discretionary, but it was requested that it come back because it could provide some efficiencies with the service. So the board actually asked that the project come back.
Thank you. I have a very lengthy speakers list, but I'm going to take a stab at a recommendation because I think I was the one that originally recommended that this come forward to round one. So I'm going to move option number 4, that this particular project be deferred to 2024 because it wasn't contemplated as part of the user rates, and I've got seconders for that. So as I watch my speakers list disappear. Director Henderson, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is an example of something that we really should, if you haven't already done so, reach out to the other local governments. I'm aware of a project in Seashell where they may need this sort of device, and whether we collectively buy it, or in fact, whether we get somebody who's an expert at boring holes under the roads and get them to do it for us. So,
Thank you. Director McMahon?
Yeah, I was just curious why we would not fund this from reserves.
Good question. I don't know if CFO Pro would be able to answer that today. Otherwise, we could possibly have that conversation in 2024 round 1 or pre-budget. Yeah, I don't think you're getting an answer on that today. So it's a good question, but keep it in mind. I will call the question. All those in favor of deferral to 2024? And that's carried. Thank you. And thank you, staff, for indulging us in bringing that one forward. So that's the end of regional water, or of Annex nope. HHH, thank you. I've already crossed it off and tossed away the cover sheet, so I've already moved on. Next up is Annex III, which is water services and regional solid waste. So combined proposals. And we are looking at, on page 570, item number 1, various infrastructure capital projects implementation coordinator 1.0 FTE. Anything from directors? Recommendations? Questions? I just had one question in looking at the various functions that are considered here. 365, 366, and 370 are all user rates. So I assume the funding for those portions are funded from user rates. The portion of this that's apportioned to regional solid waste would then be funded from taxation or tipping fees, or yeah, I'm just looking for the source of funding for the regional solid waste component of this. And perhaps we would need to refer it to round 2 for further information or conversation on that. So Director McMahon, did you want to jump in in the meantime?
Actually, yeah, it is confusing, so perhaps the best thing is to move to refer this to round 2 budget.
Thank you. And I've got a seconder for that. I don't see any other hands up, so I will call the question. All those in favor? Thank you, that's carried. Moving on to item number 2 on page 571. Water Services Review of SCRD Subdivision Servicing Bylaw number 320. This is split funding sources from the water services, $40,000 from user fees. Director McMahon?
Oh boy, do I want to see this review. Does this include the criteria for us taking on sewer plants, small sewer systems?
Through the chair, and thank you for the question. Bylaw 320 it does include how we take on community sewer systems.
Follow up?
I would like to move that this be approved and incorporated into round 2.
Thank you, and I've got seconder for that, so I don't see any other hands up. I will call the question. All those in favor? And that's, any opposed? Director Henderson opposed, that's carried, thank you very much. On 572, item number 3, Water Services Water Rate Structure Review Phase 2. $60,000 funded from user fees across the 3 water services. Director McMahon.
Yep, I'm getting a lot of people wanting volumetric pricing, so I'd like to move this be approved and incorporated into round 2.
Do I have a seconder for that? I have a seconder for that. Do I have any discussion from directors? Director Henderson?
Not to put her on the spot, but I did see staff's hand up
Apologies. CFO Pro?
and then down. But
Yeah, I think this is one where we are currently in the midst and just actually kicked off a particular project. So this one here is where we are essentially putting money in, not really, we're not 100% certain if we're going to need it. I think that a lot of the work that they're going to do is, assumed from a volumetric, but there's a lot more that we are contemplating as part of this rate structure review. So it's important for the public and the board to understand that it isn't just related to volumetric billing. It's associated with what is a sustainable service delivery. So to many points that happened, or that have already happened today and on multiple times, is whenever we're doing rate updates for the regional water service, but also for the other 2, is we are very near term approving these rates, so we want a longer term outlook. And one of the key points to that, and which we've already provided internally, is our comprehensive asset management, or what we're trying to say is what is a sustainable service delivery model, and depicting service levels. We don't have that for North, South, and Regional completed yet, and so that information can tie to that. So again, that's what the contractor is currently assessing right now, so we might get further than we anticipated in this first phase, and if we need to get to that second phase, then this would be money in the budget to allow us to do that. But we may decide that at this stage, we'll take the information that the contractor has provided and take it from here from an internal side of the house. So just wanted to provide more context, because I think people would be interested in that.
Okay. And so similar to other user fee projects, if this doesn't end up going forward, anything remaining would be transferred to reserves. I'm seeing head nods. So, okay. Director Bax?
So if I'm to understand that from the title of this project, it's, this is phase 2. Are you in phase 1 right now? Okay, and do you have a timeline for when that's going to be finished up?
Through the chair, and thank you for the question. The contract expires at the end of May, and the contractor is tracking towards that deadline.
Okay, and so I understand the timeline for the metering projects that are going on is we're still a year to year and a half out. Will phase 2 be finished up in line with the activation of all the meters? Is that the idea?
This is the comment that I heard from the CFO, is that we don't even know if phase 2 is necessarily going to be necessary as presented here. They're going to wait to complete phase 1. This would give them the resources necessary to launch into phase 2 if they decide they need outside support to do that.
Follow up.
Yep.
So the recent increase that we made to water rates, is the price of this contract reflected in that?
Seeing some head nodding, so yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Gabias?
Thank you, Chair. It's more a curiosity question. Will this review include anything to do with food growers and how water rates would apply to them?
Thank you for the question. The contractor is looking at all water users.
Thank you. I don't see any other. Director Lee? Microphone.
I was trying to refresh my memory on phase one, but I didn't quite get there. I'm having trouble remembering whether we had referred these to WASAC and the state of the WASAC referrals.
Thank you for the question, and through the chair. This was a report in December 9th, 2021. Came as a report during pre-budget for last year's budget when we were looking at bringing forward a budget proposal for phase one. That report was then referred to WASAC, the Water Supply Advisory Committee, in the spring of 2022. The committee provided a lot of good information. They said that the public would want to see options, but should not be determining what those options are. They decided that, or their feedback was that structuring the water rates was very technical, and that work was best left to the contractor. However, the public will be very interested. So just to add to what the CFO mentioned, we are also looking, it's possible that we won't use all of the funds in phase two if it's covered in phase one. I do believe that we are going to get further than we anticipated, which is great. But we want to ensure that there's also some funds for having open houses and reaching out to the public and letting them know the intention and the direction. And then there will also be, as part of phase two, and then further into phase three, any changes that are made will need to be incorporated into the bylaw. So work could be needed there. So we may need some funding, let's say, for legal review or technical review.
Thank you. Director Henderson?
Thank you, through you. I guess my concern is this is only the third-party costs in here. So, you know, the cost of this, and I'm struggling with this anytime these, particularly in these times, but I respect public engagement. I just wonder if how much we really need to keep going out to consultants. We've got a lot of very talented people on staff, and I'd kind of challenge you to try to support us through your own expertise. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you for the question, and through the chair, the intention is not to hire a consultant to do any public engagement, but we may want to book a room or put out advertisements, and those all have costs associated with them, and they would be associated with this project.
This is more of a funding envelope within which to conduct the further work. Okay, thank you. I don't see any other hands up, so I will call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Director Henderson opposed. Motion's carried. Thank you very much. And next up, we have item number 4 on page 573, Water Services, Water Strategy Implementation, Develop Water System Action Plans. So $87,000 to be funded from user fees across the 3 water services. Director McMahon?
I don't remember this one. Perhaps staff could give us a little bit more background on this?
Thank you for the question. The budget proposal that is before you is related to ensuring that the work of the water strategy is implemented. So one piece that came up when we were reviewing how we implemented the 2013 Comprehensive Regional Water Plan was related to ensuring that even though we had capital plans, we knew the projects that we wanted to bring forward, we didn't have very good estimates for the cost of the projects and the resourcing, the staff resourcing that would be required to actually implement them. So this budget proposal is meant to support any work that comes out of there are several technical projects that are related to the water strategy. For example, water modeling work that Steve is undertaking to determine how water moves throughout the system, what upgrades are needed to our existing system. And if new projects come out of that, we want to ensure that they are properly costed and that we know how they, in terms of priority, which ones should come first, and the staff resources to implement them. And we don't currently have any budget to estimate that.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands. Thank you, Director Henderson.
Thank you, Chair. This is raises a question of what's not in this, and that is, do you have plans, or perhaps it's all funded within the staff time, to model on what our demands are going to be for water this year during the different scenarios of drought? Thanks.
Thank you for the question. The last water demand analysis was completed in 2018. There's funding within the long-term source options. It was a budget proposal that was brought forward last year to update the 2018 water demand analysis. If you go back to the budget proposals of last year, you'll see it's in the fine print. And we're hoping as part of that project that we will update the 2018 water demand analysis, that even though that seems like only a few years ago, I would say a lot has changed in terms of climate impacts to our water demand in the summer months.
Thank you for that.
So can I just clarify, so you expect to have that done soon, this year, tomorrow?
Thank you for the question. We have not drafted an RFP for that consulting project. Unfortunately, it has fallen due to our other priorities, but we recognize that it is very important, and it's certainly at high up at the top of our lists. And I would say there was a lot of work that was deferred last fall due to the Emergency Operations Center, state of local emergencies, and other impacts of the 2022 drought.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
Yes, 2018 does seem like a long time ago at this point. None of us had heard of a heat dome, for instance. So
Or atmospheric rivers.
Or, I don't think we had either. Great, lovely. We're learning so much. Okay, I would like to move that this proposal be approved and incorporated in round 2.
Thank you very much. I have a seconder for that. Director Bax, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about a subject that was brought up that might not be germane to what we're talking about right now.
Go ahead and start, and I'll cut you off. If I
Thank
think
you.
you're-
That's a good way to do it. So I've been telling people that because of the work that's been done with our water system, that should we face similar conditions that we faced in 2022, that we won't be going into a state of local emergency, and perhaps not even a stage 4. Is there any possibility that I'm lying?
Yes, for sure.
There's always the possibility that you're lying, Director Bax. It's just what probability are you lying is the question.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to assume you're not lying, but what Church Road is going to do is contribute up to 5 million liters a day to our system. So I can't guarantee that we're not going to have stage 4 this year, but we will have an additional 5 million liters. At the end of stage 4 this year, in context, the system was using about 10 million liters. So hopefully that answers your question, but it's an increase in 5 million liters of volume of water a day.
And that can be brought online early in the process, which means that water stays in Chapman Lake. Yes. That 5 million liters every day. So, yeah. I don't see any other hands up, so I will call the question to approve and incorporate. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. And that finishes off water. Next up, we have Annex JJJ, saving the best for last, wastewater treatment. Director McMahon?
Yeah, I just had a general comment about our budget process, is that I think everybody feels that water is the most important thing in our budget right now. And because of the order in which the budget is arranged, it's the last thing we talk about. And I'm wondering if in future we could try to organize our budget in the order of urgent and essential services.
We
Just-
do have a
just
budget
point.
debrief session coming up.
Yay.
I look to staff for some indication of when we may have that budget debrief session. I don't remember. I know we talked about it, but
Typically, it's after the budget's been adopted, so April or May is typically the timeframe. Just
thank you. I'll make a note on the parking lot. Director Gabias, I see your hand up. Okay, you're ready to move on. Thank you. So Annex JJJ, wastewater treatment plants, looking at item number 1 on page 574, which is the Square Bay wastewater treatment plant collection system, planning for system upgrades. Director Gabias.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, staff, for doing the work of applying for grants. And since we're still waiting to see if we're getting the grant, I would recommend that we move that the following budget proposal be referred to 2023 round 2 budget. Waiting for that grant.
Thank you. I have a seconder for that, so that is on the floor. All of these wastewater items are voting A, B, D, E, and F, because they're all single service participants. Director Lee, I see your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm trying to put this in context. We have very many more wastewater plants that are listed in this budget proposal. So I'm trying to figure out why these few are in the budget proposal. There must be a reason.
Through the chair, I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
Are you asking why we're not doing work on more of them, or?
We have plans for operating and upgrading all of our, well, most of our plants, not all. I think the answer to my question is that these are the only ones we're going to spend capital money on to this year, and that's why they're on there. Is that correct?
Thank you, Chair. If I understand you correctly, we have ongoing projects in wastewater plants that aren't identified here because they're pre-approved funds. These will be undeferring funds and new feasibility studies.
Got it. Thank you. We've, in effect, when we did the user fees early on in the year, we approved a whole bunch of them, but not these.
My understanding is when you did the user rate fees, it included these. All the previous approved projects are already in the budget.
If we look at, for example, item number 3, the wastewater treatment plant pump out costs. I know it's a little thing, but it shows 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different services there. When we were doing the user rate reviews, we were going through these one service at a time. And so now we're looking at these from a project-based perspective rather than each service individually. I think maybe that's where some of the compacting of the agenda has come from, let's say. Director Lee?
Thank you, Chair. I'm ready to go forward. I think I have it now.
Thank you. Director Stanford?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering why, actually, I understood because of, to hear about a grant, that we'd be moving this to round 2, but this is, I note that this is non-discretionary, and that even if we don't get the grant, I would consider this critical. So my preference is just to move it to the budget.
I think by the time we get to round 2, we're hoping to know about whether we've received the grant or not. CFO Perot?
There's also some constraints within Square Bay from a financial perspective. They are extremely limited on funds. That was part of what was presented as part of the special rate structure. And so because this project too was, I think, budgeted differently through that rate review, we'd have to do a review of financially how they can do fund this project without the grant and what it would do in essence to their financial situation. The other part too is we don't have the 2022 year end completed, and there was a lot of mounting costs for this service, so we're trying to, or at least at round 2, we'll have a better idea as to where they stand financially. So I wouldn't recommend we rush. I think we should be very careful, especially with Square Bay, because of the financial situation.
Thank you. I do have a motion on the floor to refer this to round two. I don't see any other hands. I will call the question. A, B, D, E, and F. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to item number 2 on page 575. Square Bay Wastewater Treatment Plant Collection System Infiltration Reduction Phase 1 and 2. Director Gabius.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I will move that the following budget proposal be approved and incorporated into the 2023 Round 2 budget.
And I have seconders for that. Thank you. I don't see any other hands up. I will call the question. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Moving on to item number 3, page 576. This is wastewater treatment plants pump out costs for various plants. 19,435 funded from user fees across a range of services. I guess the question that I have, even though I don't vote on this, hopefully you'll indulge me. I think this is the second year that we've seen increased rates in pump outs, and fully acknowledge that the first year we saw it was because the District of Sechelt raised the septage disposal fees. Is this increase because of increased service needs, like increased pump outs required at these wastewater plants, or is it just annualizing those increases? I don't recall if that came up during the special meeting. CFO Perot? Or, yeah, Manager Waukee?
Thank you, Chair. It's a combination. I can't remember what the increase is that the District of Sechelt has set on the disposal of the sludge right now, because that's where we take it. And also, as was noted in the free reviews, are trying to make sure that these plants are fully funded, and some places have been identified that we need an extra pump out or something like that.
Okay.
And one pump out could be up to $3,000 kind of thing, so.
Thank you. Director McMahon?
Yeah, I don't have to ask what the results of not pumping.
No, for sure.
So, I would like to, move that this be approved and incorporated into round 2. Thank you.
Thank you. And do I have a seconder for that? I do have a seconder. Thank you. Director Bax, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to find out, is this a tendered contract? There's several different companies on the coast that would handle this type of work. Does this go out to tender?
Thank you, Chair. There's multiple companies on the coast that we use for pump out. Quite often they're emergencies and we need to get a truck on site. And then the sludge is only one place to take it on the Sunshine Coast.
All right. I don't see any other hands up. I will call the question. Voting A, B, D, E, and F. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Moving on to item number 4 on page 577. Secret Cove Jolly Roger Wastewater Treatment Plants Outfall Maintenance Phase 1. This is Area B. So Director Gabias.
Thank you, Chair. A question for Manager Waukee. So it is a discretionary project, and yet there seems to be some substantial risks. Doesn't sound like a good thing when the outfall pops up. Could you tell me a little bit more about the risks that would be facing if we did not do this year?
Thank you, Chair. This last summer, was it, the line floated again, and it's weights that are on the outfall line. We've done quite a bit of work in the past to put more on, and for some reason there was an air pocket in this one area that's floated up, and it's a hazard. It's a marine hazard. It's in the bay there, and so the divers that came in on an emergency force, fortunately they were out of Gibson's and were able to get up there within 3 hours, kind of thing, and sink it back down to the bottom. Have recommended installing more weights. So again, I can't remember exactly how much that emergency repair cost, but it was probably more than what we're asking for here to do this proactive weighting of the outfall.
We're actually looking at a similar project in Sechelt with our outfall, and our staff have referred to that, the loss of weights and the buoyancy as zippering, because once the outfall starts to float, it becomes sort of a cascading effect. It can take care of the rest of the weights that are on it. So, Director Gabias, this is your area. I will look to you.
Yes, well, I am convinced that we should be doing this, so I will move that the following budget proposal be approved and incorporated into the 2023 Round 2 budget, please.
And I have a seconder for that. Thank you. I don't see any other hands up, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Moving on to item number 5 on page 579. This is Sunnyside Wastewater Treatment Plant Feasibility and Planning Study. This is Area E, so Director McMahon?
Oh, it really is. Yeah. I have trepidations about what this study is going to tell us in terms of costs going forward, but I believe we even have to find the lines, the distribution lines that are now under people's fences, and a lot of blackberries and all kinds of exciting things. So, yeah, and I checked our capital balance. We can do this. It has to be done. So I would like to move that this be approved and incorporated into round 2.
Thank you. And I have a seconder for that. I don't see any other hands up, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Item number 6 on page 580, Jolly Roger Wastewater Treatment Plant Feasibility and Planning Study, $12,500 funded from operating reserves, Area B. So Director Gabias?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I will move that the following budget proposal be approved and incorporated into the 2023 Round 2 budget.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Seconded. Thank you. I don't see any hands up, so I will call the question. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. And moving on to item number 7, Secret Cove Wastewater Treatment Plant Feasibility and Planning Study. $12,500 from operating reserves, Area B again. So, Director Gabias?
Yes, so I'll move that the budget proposal be approved and incorporated into the 2023 Round 2 budget.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? I do. Thank you. And I don't see any hands up, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. That takes us to the end of Annex JJJ. Thank you, Manager Walkie. And that takes us to the end of our reports, I believe. I don't see any panicking over at the table, and so I think, I'm shocked and astonished, but I think we can move on. We have no communications, we have no new business, and we have no in-camera session scheduled, so I look for a motion to adjourn. Moved and seconded, all those in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you. And I assume we don't have any questions from our GM of Community Services or one of our alternate directors. So thank you very much, everybody.